The Greens have been having a rather rough time recently. Not only did their former leader, Adam Band, lose his own seat in the latest federal election, but they've now lost a senator, Dorinda Cox, to the Labour Party. And not only that, she went out with a bang, accusing the Greens of racism and a culture of bullying in a rather incendiary letter that has now been leaked to the press. So let's have a look into this, and I'll let you determine for yourself whether you think the Greens are racist, or whether you think Dorinda Cox is going overboard, or whether both might in fact be the case. Now, of course, I'm hardly the first person to talk about this. For example, Daily Insight has also done a video about this, and I'll link to that in the description below. But nevertheless, I'll give you my thoughts about this whole situation. So, the ABC is reporting that, quote, in a fiery resignation letter, ex-Greens Senator Dorinda Cox has accused her former party of racism and ignoring serious claims she raised, including disputed allegations of an assault at Perth Airport by a party member. The senator also denied in her letter ever bullying others, contrary to reporting, adding that she'd suffered a, quote, unremitting campaign of bullying over the past 18 months. Alright, so what can we see here? Well, firstly, Dorinda Cox has alleged that she was potentially assaulted or at least somewhat accosted at Perth Airport. Now, it appears that when we dig into this, there's two wildly conflicting accounts of what happened here. Dorinda Cox appears to claim that there were serious allegations at Perth Airport. By contrast, the other person appears to claim they were just saying hello to Dorinda Cox, and any contact was purely innocent in nature and was designed to be a friendly greeting. Where exactly the truth lies, well, we don't really know at the moment, but it does appear that there is a little bit of a standoff. She has also claimed there was a culture of unremitting bullying. However, we should note that Dorinda Cox herself was accused of bullying by her own underlings. Now, she appears to claim that the allegations of bullying against her were in fact retaliatory in nature, and there were no grounds underlying those, and there was no case to answer. Again, I guess that would be something that needs to be determined through the proper investigative process if one actually occurs. Which, given that she's defected to Labour, and Labour holds government, and Anthony Albanese has said those claims have been dealt with, it's not clear to me that there will be any more investigation into these, even if there should be. After all, Labour did talk about cleaning up the culture of Parliament, but it doesn't really appear they actually care when it's one of their own MPs or one of their own senators, even someone who's defected to the Labour Party who is actually on the committing end. Nevertheless, Dorinda Cox stated that the Greens had, quote, failed her as its last First Nations MP and continue to fail First Nations people. In my experience, the Greens tolerate a culture that permits violence against First Nations women within its structures. In this respect, the party is deeply racist. My reports to the party and parliamentary workplace services range from being assaulted at Perth Airport by a party member, which was ignored. Indeed, I was advised to not report it to the police, to incidents involving my staff who were isolated by the state and other MPs' offices. As I've indicated, well, there is some dispute about exactly what went wrong there. However, let's take that phrase, that it's failed its First Nations MPs and it commits violence, or permits violence rather, against First Nations women. What exactly does that mean? Is she saying that the Greens permit physical assaults and indeed tacitly encourage physical assaults against First Nations people or anyone else? How do we square that with the Greens going all in with their support for The Voice, and their support for things like treaty, and their all-in support for a broader range of native title? It appears the Greens want more things done for First Nations people, but she is also accusing them of permitting violence against First Nations women. How do we square these two? Is it that Dorinda Cox is going overboard with allegations? Or is it that the Greens are hypocrites? Or is it that the truth lies somewhere between the two? Again, we don't really know, but this whole letter from Dorinda Cox kind of reads like a disgruntled employee who has rage quit their employer and might someday come to regret the letter that they sent out. After all, if Dorinda Cox ever actually made it anywhere in the Labour Party, which I think is probably unlikely, she's going to have huge trouble dealing with the Greens after this, which as an MP, or a senator rather, is something she should be thinking about. Now, of course, like I've indicated, I seriously doubt she is actually going to win at the next election where she goes up for election, because Labour has its own slate of senators who would be potentially elected at the next election, so she's hardly going to move up the totem pole for election. Furthermore, the Greens are clearly going to choose someone else for their Senate seats, so I don't know exactly what she thinks she is going to gain from this, because it might only marginally prolong her political career. Dorinda Cox also says, "Recently, my children were approached by a former staff member who had publicly made serious allegations about me at a Greens event. This type of mobbing made its way into, quote, moderated online meeting chats and the widely circulated meeting minutes of the Australian Greens First Nations network. The Greens failed in their duty of care for my staff and me, and disregarded the reported and obvious impact of what was occurring. The focus was solely on winning seats." Again, it could be that the Greens had approached in a rather acrimonious or intimidating manner her children, or it could be that the children were just at an event and someone from the Greens happened to say hello. We don't really have the context here, and I'm not inclined to necessarily believe either party. I actually want some primary evidence of this to be able to substantiate any of these allegations. I wouldn't put it past the Greens to be one of the most nasty and acrimonious and aggressive parties in Parliament. However, Dorinda Cox has her own bullying allegations levelled against her, so I'm also not entirely convinced that I should believe her account at face value either. Of course, the Greens have shot back, with the current Greens leader, that is, Larissa Waters, claiming these claims are disappointing, unrepresentative of the support Senator Cox received, and ignore the substantive work undertaken by the party to find a resolution to the complaints made both by and against Senator Cox, and to address the breakdown of her relationship with the Greens First Nations members. Now, of course, for her part, Senator Cox refutes those allegations, saying, "I am not, and never have been, a bully. I do not perpetrate it." Which, of course, is the exact type of thing you would expect a bully to say when they're accused of bullying. Nevertheless, she also says, "I faced an unremitting campaign of bullying and dishonest claims over the last 18 months. She's seemingly claiming that people have ganged up on her to level allegations of bullying that are not substantiated in fact, or at least are no worse than what any other senator is engaged in, and therefore she is being singled out for different treatment. Again, we don't really know exactly where the truth lies at the moment. After all, it's possible that maybe she just became unpopular, so people decided to try to gang up on her. I wouldn't put that past the Greens. The Greens do seem like the type of party where that could occur. But also, because of who is in the Greens, it wouldn't surprise me if a Greens senator also engaged in bullying. Maybe it's actually both. Maybe we need some primary evidence to make up our own minds. But of course, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Dorinda Cox is in the right? Do you think the Greens are in the right? Or do you think they're all just a bunch of crybullies and hypocrites? Let me know what you think.